I spent the better part of 2 decades trying to forget that summer, but some things just stick with you even if you try to bury them deep. I was 26 years old back then, working a dead-end job at a print shop in a small town called Oak Haven. It was the kind of place where nothing really happened, ever. My routine was pretty set: wake up, go to work, come home, make dinner, watch some TV, and repeat. My biggest excitement was usually finding an extra $5 in an old pair of jeans. It was peaceful, I guess, but also a little boring. That changed pretty abruptly when I got the call about my Aunt Clara. My mom said she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Clara lived alone, out on the edge of town, in a house that had been in our family for generations. I hadn't seen her in years, not since I was a teenager. She was always a bit eccentric. The kind of relative everyone nods at politely during holidays but avoids eye contact with. My mom told me that Clara had willed the house to me and everything in it. It was a shock, to be honest. I was still renting a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of Oak Haven, and suddenly I owned a whole house. It wasn't a mansion or anything, just a small 2-story place, a bit run down, but it was mine. The thought of owning a house, of having space, was pretty exciting for a guy who spent his evenings watching reruns in a place barely big enough for his futon. So I drove out there the following weekend, key in hand, ready to start the process of going through everything. The house stood on a decent-sized lot, surrounded by overgrown bushes and a couple of crooked oak trees. The paint was peeling, and the front porch sagged a little on one side. It looked exactly like I remembered it, old and a little forgotten. The first thing I noticed when I walked inside was the smell. It wasn't a bad smell exactly, just old, like dust, dried flowers, and paper that had been sitting undisturbed for too long. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight slicing through the grimy windows. The furniture was all antique, heavy wood, and faded upholstery, draped in white sheets. It felt like walking into a time capsule. I started in the living room, pulling off the sheets. Everything was neat, surprisingly so for someone I remembered as a bit of a pack rat. As I moved from room to room, it became clear why the house felt so strange. Every single mirror, every reflective surface was covered in taped up newspaper. From small decorative mirrors to the large full-length one in the hallway, each one was meticulously hidden behind yellowing headlines and crossword puzzles. It was odd for sure. My first thought was that Aunt Clara was just superstitious. Maybe she believed mirrors could trap spirits or something, or maybe she just didn't like looking at herself anymore. I chuckled at the thought, picturing her carefully taping up each one, making sure there wasn't a single gap. It definitely fit with the eccentric image I had of her. I figured it was just another one of her quirks. I spent most of that first day just airing the place out and getting a feel for it. The house was bigger than my apartment, obviously, but not overwhelmingly so. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a living room, dining room, and kitchen downstairs. There was also a small study off the living room, packed with bookshelves. By the time late afternoon rolled around, I decided to tackle the newspaper situation. I wanted to see the house properly, without all these veiled surfaces. It felt claustrophobic, honestly, like the house was holding its breath. I grabbed the edge of the newspaper on the hall mirror, peeled back a corner, and then just ripped it off. It came away easily enough, leaving behind a bit of sticky residue that I figured I could clean later. One by one, I went through the house, pulling the newspaper off every mirror. Some were small, just decorative things. Others were large and heavy, like the big one in my aunt's bedroom that stretched almost floor to ceiling. The task took about an hour, maybe a little more. The sound of tearing paper echoed in the quiet house. With each uncovering, more light seemed to fill the rooms, or at least the rooms felt more open. After I'd finished, I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around. The house still felt old, but it also felt lighter, somehow, cleaner. I even caught my reflection in the newly uncovered dining room mirror, a quick glance at my tired face and dusty clothes. Nothing out of the ordinary, just me. I decided to stay the night. It was late, and I had a few boxes of my own stuff in my truck I could bring in. Plus, I wanted to get a head start on going through more of Clara's belongings. I made a quick trip to the grocery store for some easy food, a 6-pack of beer, and an extra blanket. That evening, after a microwave dinner and a couple of beers, I was feeling pretty relaxed. The house, while still kind of spooky with its old furniture and creaking floors, didn't feel threatening. It just felt like an old house. I set up a sleeping bag in what I figured would be my bedroom upstairs, the one with the big mirror, because it was the largest. I was restless though. Sleeping in a new place always messes with me. And add to that the fact it was a house I inherited from a dead aunt. My mind kept replaying the image of her, this quirky old woman taping up mirrors. I still found it kind of funny, in a dark humor way. Around 2 in the morning, I had to get up to use the bathroom. The house was dead quiet, no traffic outside, just the distant chirping of crickets. I found the bathroom easily enough, just across the hall from the bedroom. After I was done, I walked back toward the bedroom, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. As I stepped across the threshold into the bedroom, I started to turn to my left to head toward the sleeping bag. It was a fluid motion, just a simple pivot. And that's when I saw it. In the large mirror, spanning almost the entire wall, I saw my reflection. It wasn't me exactly, it was me, but caught in the act of turning, just a half second behind the real me. As I finished my turn in the physical world, my reflection in the mirror was just starting its turn, lagging like a bad internet connection. My tired mind didn't process it immediately. I blinked, rubbing my eyes harder. Maybe I was just seeing things, half asleep and in a new, unfamiliar place. I looked at the mirror again. This time I was just standing there, looking at my reflection, and my reflection was standing there, looking back at me, completely normal. I shook my head, convinced it was just sleep deprivation playing tricks on me. I got into my sleeping bag, but sleep didn't come. My mind was racing now, replaying that split-second lag. It was so subtle, so brief, that part of me still wanted to dismiss it. But another part, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, told me something wasn't right. I tried to convince myself it was the darkness, the unfamiliarity, the old house, anything but the mirror itself. The next morning, I woke up feeling exhausted. The first thing I did was look at the mirror. It was just a mirror. My reflection was perfectly aligned with my movements. I even tried to replicate the turn. I walked into the room, turned, and watched myself. Nothing. Perfectly normal. I almost laughed at my own silliness. I was getting spooked by an old house and a lack of sleep. But later that day, as I was going through some boxes in the study, I found it. Tucked away under a pile of knitting patterns and old photographs was a small, leather-bound diary, Aunt Clara's by the looks of it. It looked old and well-used. I opened it, curious, figuring it might shed some light on her mirror obsession. The first few pages were typical diary entries, notes about gardening, recipes, observations about local gossip. But then, about halfway through, the entries started to change. They became shorter, more fragmented, and increasingly unsettling. It mentioned shadows in her peripheral vision, a feeling of being watched when she was alone in the house, the sound of soft breathing behind her, but only when she turned her head quickly enough that there was nothing there. She wrote about her cat, Mittens, staring intently at empty corners for long stretches of time. I read on, a knot forming in my stomach. Then, I found the entry that stopped me cold. It simply said, "I'm seeing it in the glass now sometimes. Just a flicker, like a glitch. I tried to dismiss it, but it's too consistent." My hands started to tremble as I continued. The next few entries were more frantic. She described the same thing I had seen, that subtle delay, sometimes a half second, sometimes less, just a brief, almost imperceptible lag in her reflection. She also mentioned other things, smaller, stranger things. Her reflection's eyes might linger for a moment longer than her own. Her reflection might smile just a beat after she did. Little imperfections that, when noticed, became impossible to unsee. And then, towards the end, the entries became obsessive. Almost every page had some variation of the same phrase, repeated over and over, sometimes scrawled haphazardly across the page, sometimes neatly written, but always there. Never let them see you notice. Never let them see you notice. It filled page after page, sometimes the only thing written for an entire day. I shut the diary with a snap, the sound echoing in the quiet study. My heart was pounding. The weirdness I had felt the night before, that brief, unsettling moment in the mirror, suddenly had a name, a context. Aunt Clara saw it too, and she was driven to cover up every mirror in her house because of it. I walked back to the bedroom, slowly, deliberately. The large mirror on the wall seemed to loom, reflecting the dim afternoon light filtering through the window. I stood in front of it, my breath catching in my throat. I stared at my reflection, willing it to be normal, wanting to laugh off the whole thing as a crazy old woman's delusions influencing my own tired mind. I took a deep breath. Then I lifted my right hand, slowly, and touched my cheek. My reflection did the same, perfectly. I moved my head side to side. It mirrored me flawlessly. I even tried that turn again, the way I had done it the night before. Still perfect. But then, as I stood there, watching my reflected self, I tried something small. I forced a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch in my left eyelid. Just a flicker. And my reflection, it didn't twitch with me, not at first. It was a fraction of a second later, just a beat, that the reflection's eyelid twitched. Barely noticeable. So subtle, in fact, that if I hadn't been looking for it, if I hadn't read the diary, I would have missed it entirely, but I saw it. It wasn't a half-second delay this time, not a full motion lag, just a tiny, almost imperceptible slip in perfect synchronization. And that's when I finally understood. I walked over to the mirror, my heart still hammering in my chest, and pressed my palm against the cool glass. I looked into my reflection's eyes, and for a split second, I felt like something was looking back out of them. A cold, flat, unblinking stare that wasn't entirely mine. I backed away slowly. No, not slowly. I practically stumbled backward, tripping over something on the floor. I wasn't going to stay there another night, not a chance. The image of Aunt Clara, painstakingly taping up every single mirror, now made perfect, terrifying sense. She hadn't been crazy, she had been trying to hide. Trying to sever the connection, whatever it was. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and a small backpack. I didn't even bother to pack what I had brought in the day before. I just needed to get out. The house, which had felt merely old and quiet that morning, now felt like it was watching me, filled with a silent, unseen presence. That feeling of being watched wasn't just Aunt Clara's paranoia anymore, it was mine. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't look back. I just kept driving until Oak Haven was a distant glow in my rearview mirror.